This conference will now be recorded.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call roll?
Here.
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 Here. Here. Item 4 is consent agenda approval of the minutes from November 24th, statement of bills paid, and resolution 2025-2022, setting the 2026 governing body meeting schedule.
I have a couple of questions if I could. On page 4, I might have asked this before. The Wex Bank, I know that's a negative, and on the next page, it's a positive, the 923549. What was that?
Wex Bank is fuel. Please.
They didn't receive our payments. We did that check.
Okay. Okay.
Just reflects the payment method.
And then one more question, sorry, I'm being nosy. Same page 4, Murphy Tractor and Equipment Company.
Yeah.
That's a Missouri company. Just an observation.
Yeah, and it may have been purchased and handled through service.
Okay. Okay.
I can clarify with Brian. There were a couple similar ones. They were either, one was they did invoices for a tractor that we purchased for several months. They did that maybe last month. And then there's also repair, and they were very similar.
Okay. Just keep it here in local.
Yeah.
Cam. Okay. Just my 2 questions. Make a motion to approve consent agenda for A, B, and C.
I said,
A motion from Councilman Shriver, a second from Councilman Mullen. Will the clerk please call roll?
yes.
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 Item number 5 is requests or comments from the public. Okay. Moving on to item number 6. Consider approving the guaranteed maximum pricing proposal from Fogel Anderson representatives specific to the construction of the Edwardsville Municipal Complex.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council, you have item number 6 background before you, and this is the 3rd install of the guaranteed maximum pricing. We were excited about the other ones, but we're real excited about this, and I'll have this. Fogel Anderson to make the presentation.
Thank you all for having me again tonight. I apologize. I'm losing my voice, but we're going to do our best to get through the presentation before it completely goes. So if you will remember from the other times that I've been here before you, I just want to talk a little bit about our process of getting to our guaranteed maximum price tonight, number 3. Go to the next one. I will take the click. So we're asking tonight for $11,083,533, which will be the final GMP amendment to our contract for your total project. As always before, it's our job to bring you as many potential bidders as we can in an effort to drive competition to get you the maximum that you can for your dollars for your project. We invited over 2,500 bidders through various different plan rooms. We also had a pre-bid meeting where we invited folks to come on site and see existing conditions, to ask questions, submit any official RFIs to us and to our partners at the design team to make sure there's plenty of clarity in your project to get the best bids that we possibly can. Bid day was the 13th of November. We had right around 225 bids. So throughout all the packages that we accepted bids on for all the various trades, that's more than 5 bidders for each package. So it was a phenomenal bid day, a very, very well attended bid day. Exciting project for not only you and your community, but the subcontracting market as well. So where did we end up on budget? So this diagram here is just a snapshot of our most recent budget that we did back in August of your project. Again, we had documents that were still under the design phase. They were not finished, so we were predicting costs. You can see here that we hit exactly where we wanted to be, where we thought we were going to be. Services being mechanical, electrical, plumbing, those did come in a little bit higher than anticipated, but as you can see from some of the other lines, we actually had savings in those from our projected budget that offset and brought us in right about where we thought we would be, right where we needed to be for your budget. So to recap, our first GMP was right under the $3 million mark that we had allocated. GMP number 2 was for site utilities. If you'll remember, that used to be lumped together into a total line item for the whole municipal building. We did break that out to get those under contract and get moving earlier. So when you look at how the numbers shook out, we are running right alongside budget from where we had predicted that we would be. We still have a little bit of work to do on that total overall program budget, but that continues, and we move forward always with our eye on the prize of your total bond budget. Recap of the schedule. As you know, the fire station is underway. I believe we're pouring concrete. I believe we have got some steel beams. We have more steel being delivered as we speak, and full speed ahead on that. Site utilities, we are beginning working on that, getting Evergy and some of the other things prepared before we'll really see good forward momentum on that, but there is plenty of things happening in the background. And then municipal building, we will get through contracts with all of our subcontractors, and we will begin working on that early 2026. So with that, I will answer any questions that you may have of us. Okay.
Is the demolition of this building in here somewhere? I get this on Friday at 4 o'clock.
Yes.
I have a weekend to try and look at it and cipher out what it is. So there's probably a lot of questions that I could ask, but I won't. I don't feel like I've been kept up to date very well on what's been going on as a member of the council. I'll probably find myself on that. I like the project. I really think it's a great deal. The other question is, I thought we were rolling for $19 million, and now we're down to like 11 million. How's that work?
What they're talking about is 1, 2, and 3. That's the construction. We have 6 million in design, a number of other FF&E soft costs. That's what it is. We're talking. Was that 8 million creeping up a little past it? But in my conversations with the team, I think we can rectify all of that and meet the budget, which was allocated at 18.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but it's new to me. I mean, I kind of saw all this stuff Friday, so we're on budget basically.
Yes.
We're prepared to make adjustments.
Are we allowed for any kind of unexpected obstacles that would come, like any kind of the stuff there might be pipeline running under this building or something?
Yes.
That we don't know about, like the water thing that happened over at the fire station. I mean, are you prepared for those kind of problems that would arise? The paying of moving those utilities and all of that.
We have, yes. So the moving of the utilities, those costs are incorporated into our budget. To answer your first question, demolition of this building, it is also in these costs as well. And we carry a contingency within this guaranteed maximum price that we're asking of you all tonight to handle some of those unforeseen conditions that you mentioned.
Currently, in this proposal cost summary, construction contingency is $175,000. So yes. Okay.
Thank you for that. I feel like I'm not informed like I should be, and it's just because of the timing aspect of it, of me getting the information to me. And I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I'm speaking for me. So it's a big project and it's a lot of money, but I don't know that Edwardsville has ever spent that kind of money before in the past. And I just want to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and everything to make sure that we're
Understood.
where we need to be. It's kind of a scary proposition. So thank you. That's all the questions I've got. So thanks.
I had a question that came up not too long ago, and that was in just any of these building projects, if we add anything or increase the value of anything, we want certain type of light fixture instead of standard light fixture. I'm sure that is an additional cost. Is it reflected somewhere in the contract where if we are to find something that's a little more economical, that we'll see that dollar for dollar instead of it just getting absorbed by the contractor some way? If not, I'd like to see that. That was something that I'd mentioned before, like where we'll see an add-on if we add anything, but if we find ways to cut the cost, I'd like to see that. I know labor isn't always a dollar for dollar, but material should be a dollar for dollar savings.
Sure.
You asked if the contractor absorbs any of the savings.
Right. Like, for example, if we're putting in handles, that was something, or, poles, and the poles are estimated at $15 each, and we can find them for $8 each. If that's times 500, it would just be nice to know that it works both ways, that we'll see that dollar for dollar savings.
Sure. So I guess I want to answer that question in two parts. So number one, it's a guaranteed maximum price. So any savings that we realize along the way will be returned to you all, returned to the budget. But also the drawings from that you have hired your design team to do are complete. And so all of the items, as you mentioned, have been competitively bid out amongst the contractors. So they're locked in. Their pricing matches, or they will be, they're not yet as of tonight, but their pricing will match construction documents. And so if there are any savings, that will just be a group discussion that we want to make sure everybody's on the same page about, and that we are finding the right savings. Did I answer that? Yes. Okay.
I understand some of the explanation, because we've asked this before, and I think it's good to have public comment on it, is that when they work with the subcontractors, they may suggest this other product, which may be less expensive, but still of the quality and design that we call for in this project. And we maybe experience savings there, but it could be applied to an ad alternate. So your goal is take the 18 million and build your whole idea. But you may have to cut back. Right now, we have these ad alternates that we wish we're going to work towards as much as we can to get to have all the projects installed. All of our.
Any other questions from council? Motion to approve the guaranteed maximum pricing proposal.
Make a motion to,
And have the city manager execute the agreement.
make a motion to consider approving the guaranteed maximum price amendment specific to the construction of the Edwardsville Municipal Complex submitted by Fogel Anderson Construction, and authorizing the city manager to execute amendment number 3 on behalf of the city.
Second.
A motion from Councilman Shriver, a second from Councilman Everhart. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bolden,
Yes.
Everhart,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Schreiber,
Yes.
Wilcox.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your hard work. Item number 7, City Council to consider ordinance number 1098, rezoning of property located at 10600 Cod Drive from C2 Commercial Retail District to C3 General Commercial District.
Mayor, Council, thank you. City Planner Kyle Kobe make the presentation, but I do want to ensure, and we want to go ahead and hear the presentation, but that your packet contained item number 7, all the documents, and there are several. Just want to make sure we noticed one place it was there and one place it wasn't. So if you have a packet before you, just ensure that number 7 is included. It has, it's a big packet. 5, 8, 10 documents in there. Is that one? Sorry. Are we okay to proceed then?
I think I have 42.
Yes, quite a few. Yeah. 8 pages. That seems about right.
I thought you meant 7 was 40 pages.
Two item 7s.
Yeah, this
So
Sorry.
I misunderstood.
Do we have it then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's all.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. We had a
That was fine.
glitch. We deleted, whoops, and then we put it back. So I think we captured everything we needed to. So Mr. Kyle Kobe, the city planner.
Thank you very much. So as already stated, this is a rezoning request, 1K32-10600 Caw Drive, 12.77 acres. This was heard by the Planning Commission at their November 19th meeting. After presentation and discussion, Planning Commission voted unanimously 4-0 to recommend approval to the governing body, City Council, that's you guys. So I'll just briefly summarize this. This is not officially a, I'm blanking on the word all of a sudden, public hearing. I'm sorry. You do have the option to open it, but the zoning code does not require that this be a public hearing. The applicant is here. I don't know if there are any members of the public who wish to speak on it, but just so you know, that is an option available to you, but it's not a default mandate in this particular case. So this rezoning request is the front end of what would be a sequence of applications. So if approved, a development plan, preliminary and final, or a combination, and potentially platting and special use permits would all be required prior to breaking ground, starting operations on this site. You can think of this application as more or less the first step in 3 or 4 steps, each one of which would require public hearing processes, notice to the neighbors, all of the things that would go into this as well. Part of the reason why the applicant is requesting this is just to open the door possibility there. And once we get to the development plan review, a lot of the design details can be brought into play. So that's where things like what are the specific uses that are on the site? Do we need to do a special use permit? Some of that stuff depends on the scope and the scale. There are certain things at lower scales that don't require it, and then at higher scales that do. So storage outside being a good example of that. A couple of pallets doesn't qualify. If it's full-blown outdoor storage, then it does. But at the site plan stage, we can identify that and then bring all of those items up to you at that time. Platting would address any existing lot line issues. You'd be able to dedicate tracks to retain, not to be built on. Provision of utility usage. All of those kinds of things would be addressed at that time. Anyways, this is just to kind of flesh out what this application is not. You are essentially approving the ability for them to request all of this, all of these approval processes. The concept plan, and I say that in a lot of ways to lead up to what's on screen now. The concept plan before you is just that. It's a concept plan. Approval or denial is not based on what you see on screen. This is just to kind of give an idea of the kind of thing that they're looking to do. There would be an office building that would be constructed close to the street, a shop building a little bit farther back from that, and some parking areas as well. What you see on your screen now, these really tiny words are copied from. They are also available in your staff report, as well as staff's answers to these questions. Again, I know that this is kind of surface level. I'm just kind of summarizing what we discussed at the planning commission meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time. And again, I know the applicant is here as well, and there may or may not be members of the public too.
I guess I'm a little bit confused as to, yes, there's a lot of steps and a lot of public hearings, but you're asking us to actually rezone this area tonight.
Provisionally, yes. There's also a condition, as I'm sure that you've seen in the report and in the ordinance. There is a reversory note in there. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. That essentially says if they have not gotten a final development plan approved within 24 months, this property would revert back to the C2 district. This is the same sequence that was approved in 2021. There was a previous development plan that was proposed at that time. That project didn't go through. It has since reverted back to the C2 district.
I'll draw your attention to ordinance 1098, section 2.
When was that last one?
It's been,
Did we? I
Mine-
don't, did
2021.
we ever approve that? I don't think we approved that.
so this is about changing what they can do on the property. C2, C3. I use the word intensity or the activity, buildings, concept, that sort of thing. What you can do in that particular zone. And so there is some history here in that 2021, did you say?
2021.
2021. You might remember that as the trash service that didn't start out in that particular description, and therefore it was later rejected. What we're doing here is saying that if you are developing this property at C2 and then change it to C3, which they're requesting, is that they can expand, make potentially more office space, have a storage building, those kinds of things, right? It's
But
just
you're
a
not
matter,
telling us what it's for.
but they're conceptually they're saying this is what we intend to do with it if it's C3. They can tell you that, but in the end, they may have to make some modifications because it's got to go through all these processes. If the development itself maybe doesn't meet all the criteria of a C3, maybe it's too big, that sort of thing. But that's for the development phase, right? That they're going to make these proposals in writing to the commission. We'll go through all of those processes.
Yep.
And so what if I think of common sense here is that what the developer's wanting to know is, do I have to build a C2? But I'd rather build a C3 because I have this idea in my head, because it's going to be a little bigger, more, I guess, intensity of the use.
Could you go
So
over
to-
what all of the C3 uses are that are not included in C2? Like what types of things? would that
Sure.
include?
I've got a list here in front of me. I can just read off all the ones that would be changing or coming into play. In terms of special use permit requirements, so there's some are special use permit required and some are permitted. Though before I get into this list, it is worth noting that whether it does or doesn't require special use permit, the development plan process is required, and that is essentially the same process. There's the public notice component, planning commission, it comes before all of you. That's the one that gets the design review committee. The same process that the City Hall project went through. Every single project that's more or less that's not a single family house goes through that. So just a note before, I'll read off which ones are special use permit and which ones aren't. But just so you guys know, it's not like if it's not, then there's no process involved.
But just to clarify on that, so if it is something permitted in the C3, then at the design, we then can't change our mind and say, no, that's not what we want here. If it's permitted in C3, then it's zoned that way already.
The use is permitted, but the development plan regulations stipulate there's a laundry list of application requirements. That's where you have to see architectural renderings. You've got to see, you can request a traffic impact study. You can expect to see stormwater management information, how much parking is going to be there, how many people are going to be there, what are the hours of operation. All those details come into play there.
But
So
if we
those-
don't want that type of facility that we don't know what it is, that's not okay to go back to a C2 and say,
You would be evaluating it based on the design criteria at that point.
okay,
So
not the use.
not
That's
the
why
use
I
per
wanted
se.
to know what
Yeah.
you can do on a C3, and I don't think that was necessarily put in the packet. Like, what can you do in a C3 that you can't do in a C2?
So
You know what the potential is.
yeah, I can read off the list. Adult business establishments, auction services limited, both of those require special use permit. Building materials, supplies, sales and services permitted. Campground with or without recreational vehicle park, construction, sales, and service, both of those would require a special use permit. Industrial and business equipment and supplies requires a special use permit. Lottery gaming facility, state license requires a special use permit. Maintenance services, mechanical sales, maintenance and repair. Recreation, social venues, fraternal and civic lodges. Retail service limited, service station, those are all permitted. Service yard / outdoor storage area, that requires an SUP. Trade, wholesale businesses and services, vehicle and equipment repair, both of those are permitted without a special use permit. So again, this is where it gets into these broad categories like this. Like, for example, retail and service limited. That is a very like that could mean any number of things. So let's say you rezone something for that kind of thing. Somebody brings in an application and there's no landscaping. They're not surfacing their parking lot. These are just examples. At that point, it would be fair to evaluate against the criteria at that time and say, well, this use theoretically is allowed, but you still have to meet all these other standards that come into play.
If it requires special use or if it doesn't require special use.
Either way. Special use permit, given the way the Edwardsville zoning regulations are structured, I would want to say that it doesn't do anything, but it is it's another thing that would ride with the site plan requirement.
So if
So-
something's allowable in C3 and they're requesting special use permit, we can just say, no, we don't want that here, even if it's in a C3.
If it doesn't meet the design criteria, then you could, but I don't know that you could just say, no, you are not allowed to do that.
What were
The-
the first two or three things on your list?
Adult business establishments, auction services limited, building materials, supplies and sales and services.
So you're saying if somebody wanted to open an adult business here, they would need a special use permit, but we would only be restricted on the design.
They would also need to do a development plan, and there are other criterias that come into play. There's area, just for context, the site that we're standing on now is rezoned to C3 very recently. So all that same stuff, the same factors that apply to that, like how there was a development plan where all of those details came into play as well. You've got to hit every single mark. And some of these things, adult business establishments, for example, come with certain, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but location criteria, you have to be X amount of feet away from this, and this. So those things would still come into play. So someone could theoretically come in and say that, and then you'd go, well, it doesn't meet the standard. Sorry.
But we'll start with the first one. You have to have a special use permit to open adult related.
We
We have ordinances against.
there's an ordinance that says where we can put one of them, and I think it's in the middle of Mission Creek, because I dealt with that about 25 years ago.
So there's other layers, is what he's saying. I might have the idea to do that, and this might be permitted on that particular piece of property, but I don't meet all these other criteria. And what you do, how you determine that is to go through the development process, submit all of these things, right? But it's not to say that this proposal conceptually couldn't be on a C2. Dollar General is on a C2.
Correct.
This building and the new one is going to be on a C3, is that correct? Right?
This build, yeah, it's already rezoned.
Right. Yeah. It's so visually, if you think about the Dollar General parking lot, a store has an office front a little bit, that sort of thing. Pretty big building, overall, but maybe they wanted a bigger one. They would have probably had to, given the intensity of that lot, probably had to change to a C3. Would that be
Potentially, yeah.
I guess my question is, even an application coming in though, if we change the zoning, we have to be ready for any of those possibilities within that zoning to come through. And if the applicant sells it to somebody else, then does that automatically go back to C2, or does it stay C3 and then we'll see what they come up with?
The provisional approval goes with the land, not the applicant. But the time frame would still apply regardless of who it was. In the past, I know that the 24-month thing was adapted from previous examples of this. Most of the rezonings I've seen in the past 5-10 years have come with some provision like this. I've seen 12 months, I've seen 24. I recommended 24 just to kind of open the discussion on that. I didn't hear any pushback, so 24 is what stayed. That could be changed to another time frame if so desired. But regardless of that, let's say even if that wasn't in there, all of the design criteria and the review factors would still come into play. One of the other things to bear in mind is that some of these things, so like screening is a good example of a fairly open-ended, like appropriate screening. Well, that's different depending on, this was part of our discussion with the city hall. There's a default standard that says you must put a 6-foot fence up around the entire property. Well, that was waived during that because that particular type of development being reviewed under that plan review didn't mandate it, where another use would. So it's just an example of like, there are, without going through, I mean, it's pages of standards that come into play. And somebody proposes, let's say they came in here and proposed this and didn't have any stormwater management criteria. They didn't do a traffic impact study. They've got searchlights that are going to go across, like all of these, like whatever thing you can think of is subject to review. The idea being that like there might be a way to design this site that works with the character of the area. Right now, without that application, we don't know that and we can't hold them to that. But before they can do anything, they do have to submit that application. That makes sense.
Wouldn't it be better to have the application before the rezoning?
In some cases it is, but the cost and the time component for applicants, property owners, to submit the full suite of everything up front, only to potentially find out that it's not going to go through. This is a pretty common practice I've seen in a lot of places. The rezoning goes through, sometimes with a provisional time frame on it. Now we know that it's worth putting the application in. So that's another way of looking at this, is approving this gives them the ability to submit an application. And then that application gets reviewed. There are way more standards and way more fine-grained details that will come into play through that process, if that makes sense.
Passing this ordinance, you're saying that the zoning map shall not be amended until the final development plan is approved by the city. 24 months to submit all of that, to get that process going. Should they not comply with that, it's null and void, it goes back to C2. So there's your protective provision, my lay person opinion, that they're somewhat, well, it is conditional. They have to pass and change things past what it is. So you need some of these kinds of things.
Is there a for sale sign on that property right now?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
I see a for sale sign sitting on that property, so.
Sorry, say your name out loud. Tim Gates, Agnes Gates, really, the broker representing the buyer.
Somebody, has he bought it yet, or?
We have not bought it. It's conditioned upon the zoning, just because we need to, just like you said, I gotta know if we're spending $50,000 on plans.
I got you.
Or not.
My problem is the ingress egress off 32 highway is what calms everything down on the north side of 32 highway. And you've got a Dollar General store that is just a place looking for an accident, or an accident looking for a place to happen. And then the highway is going to be closed down here before too long. So to me, it seems like we ought to have a little bit more concrete kind of plans of what is going to go in there before we decide to try and change any ordinances. It seems like it's awful open-ended here for us. It seems like a gamble for us to change that. I'm not against progress, but 32 highway and trucks scares me, because that's what we've got on 32 highway. And, I think maybe we should send this back to the planning commission and let them kind of review that and do a little bit more studying on it. This was just thrown in front of us, or me, again, Friday. It's when I got this. And I feel uncomfortable trying to make a vote on something like this if I don't, this is not enough information for me to chew on to make that kind of a decision. So,
I do remember the prior business, and a little bit foggy, but I do remember the process, and I think you hit the nail on the head that tonight, if we did approve the rezoning, and then upon their development, all of that, unless that's all approved, this doesn't get approved, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
There are a number of stopgaps.
Right. There's safeguards all over the
Yes,
place.
Yeah, it wouldn't be approved there's essentially a 2-year
Right.
time delay.
And I remember the process is the way it is, because if we don't approve this tonight, this business is going to go up. They're going to go elsewhere. That's just plain and simple. But I remember the discussion back then about adult places. I mean, I remember that. That sparked my about the C3. So, but I don't know. It's a risk, but not that big of a risk because we still have safeguards in place as far as the development. Is the owner here, the potential buyer? Can we ask them questions? What's it? We can't. What is the? I mean,
Let's invite him up. Whoever his rep is. Mr. Gates, right?
Yeah, Tim Gates, Agnes Gates Realty, PO Box 4057, Overland Park, Kansas 66204. This is Chad Abbott. He's the owner of the company, Complete Excavating Inc. And I don't remember your address, over on 18 or 17 or 18th Street.
Yeah, we're 132 South 17th Street. I have an office there currently, and my shop's in Ottawa currently. So a lot of traveling back and forth between Ottawa and here, so I'm trying to find a home up here close.
so this would be a business,
Yes.
a
Construction business. He has an office component, which you see up front, to build their office building with the opportunity to expand it, basically double the size. There's in the white, there's a shaded part, or not a shaded part, but a clear part that shows that you could basically double the size of the building. And then they have a maintenance shop in that gray area, in the white inside that gray area. Most of their equipment's late model equipment that gets services on site. They do utilities and all types of public infrastructure and private infrastructure. So basically, it's construction companies wanting to move out the smaller place he's got over on 18th Street, come over here. One other, in talking about the safeguards, I think it's important because I know for most cities and most ordinances, it's adjacent to a church. So that's going to severely limit any type of adult business, alcohol, all kinds of things get restricted when you're next to a church or a school. So this property does abut to the church property. In fact, we'd have to get the easement from the church probably to get the sewer. But the contract's contingent upon us getting the zoning so we kind of know we can go in that direction. But at the same time, and then we're kind of getting into his business, but it's the situation we're in, is he has 1031 exchange money from another property he sold. And in order for him to get his 1031 exchange, he has to do it this year. So like I said, we have to close on a different property if we can't close on this property. And we've talked to staff quite a bit. We know it's an uphill battle for some of the things he'd like to do in the future, as far as be able to have more equipment on site or more outside storage. But right now he's willing to just stick with anything that's inside storage and be able to bring his equipment. Most of it's late model equipment again. It's big equipment, so it gets serviced on site. But to be able to get the office and have the garage space is the main key. And I can let him kind of explain more.
Well, and I wanted to bring up to your point, sir. You said something about the traffic. I've talked to MoDOT actually on another property as well.
KDOT over.
Well, I understand that, but just they referenced the traffic impact that I had for the property that we were looking at that time, the same as a storage unit, which is pretty low. The biggest problem we had was at one point they wanted a turn lane because the lowboy is such a long truck and waiting for traffic. That ended up being a thing, but the traffic impact was the same of a storage unit facility, which is pretty low.
But you do have low boys?
I do have a low boy.
Does he one or a bunch?
I have one, and then I have dump trucks with trailers. And actually, we store them right up the road currently.
In Bonner?
No, actually, it's KCK, but it's Anchor Trucking. That's where all my trucks are stored.
And you said something has to happen by the end of the year. Does that mean it?
It does. Actually, our sales contingent upon this rezoning.
The purchase of this property.
That's correct.
It's a 1031 exchange, and in order to defer the tax on it, you have to close in the same year you sold your property. You have to close on the replacement property in order to save the money.
Very limited on time.
The approach, though, all the risk is right here. You've got contingencies in place. You have all the ordinance, all the planning and zoning. The owner has all the investment, right? So what they're asking us to do, C3, because it fits this building, correct? And this design, they need that zone. Okay? And they're doing the development, and they're doing all the planning and all of this, so that's all on them. So really, additionally, what we're saying is if they don't get this done in 24 months, or they try to sell this, though it stays with the property, they still have that 24 month
is ticking as soon as this is.
So contingency could even be KDOT could say you're not gonna do that there, or, and now a question about sewer. What are you gonna do about sewer? There's no sewer there.
I've actually, I have permission from the church to run an easement across their property if necessary, but there is actually already an easement to the adjacent property, believe it or not.
In a sewer line there.
And a sewer line there. I don't know that it's big enough, but I know somebody who does that kind of work, so.
Where's the sewer line? Is it the one that we put in on 4th Street? 110th Edwardsville.
Yeah, no, the
Once you go across under the highway.
the sewer easement runs from the church behind the next two houses within 100 feet of our north-south property.
So I guess my question, how do you go over that hill with a sewer line?
It just depends on the depth. I mean, the easement's there. If we have to redo the line to the main, I mean, that could be done.
South of.
And in terms of elevations, there is, I say gobs of fall. Actually, I intend to meet with the Public Works manager, I believe. Brian. I plan to meet with him, but in terms of elevation, there should be plenty of elevation to get the sewer all the way across that easement and to your main.
What about this wouldn't fit in a C2? Like, what's the thing that's putting it over the edge that they couldn't do it in a C2?
The storage component primarily.
Indoor storage or outdoor storage?
Outdoor storage and the vehicle, sorry, give me just 1 second. Service yard, outdoor storage area. Again, there is another category that is just outdoor storage, that is just a straight special use permit required no matter what. The service yard outdoor storage area is a little bit, I guess I would say, softer, where that's a lower intensity version. We're talking about more than a couple pallets, but less than a Evergy laydown yard or something like that, or like a more substantial industrial, like if this was like an excavating site, but they're excavating at where they're just got stuff piled up all over the place. I'm not an excavator, so I might be.
You have machinery and things.
There's things
Yeah.
you can store the trucks. in-
Potentially,
in-
yeah, it would be trucks and equipment possibly parked outside.
Visually, in size of your storage, you have your equipment inside and servicing inside, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And then again, that would be.
V-
special use permit. That would be another application.
Vehicle and equipment repair also requires C3.
So storing them outside, working on them inside. So couldn't you do a C2 with a special use permit?
Negative. That's the intent, like, you can't even, vehicle and equipment repair is permitted only in the C3. There's not even a special use
Even when it's
provision.
your own equipment?
Correct. Service yard outdoor storage area is only permitted by special use permit in the C3. Also I1 and I2, but they're not requesting any of the industrial zoning districts.
Service yard outdoor storage area. Do we have an idea of what that looks like on their current job sites or their current facility? That would be
No,
nice.
again, that's a development plan. I can only compel so much at a rezoning level. We can ask that question and ask for images, but this site would be designed differently. We could get a general concept, but at this stage, the concept plan's about them as much design detail as we can really get into in terms of compelling. Because otherwise, we would just be essentially requiring them to submit the full site plan review package, and it would defeat the purpose of what they're trying to do here. Now, that's all still required before groundbreaking occurs, before anything happens. Same goes for we brought up KDOT earlier. Let's say KDOT comes back and says, yes, but only if you add a lane. And they're like, well, we can't add a lane. Well, it just wouldn't happen then. If there's going to be all these other things that come into play that no one can really run all these things down unless and until there is a design detailed thing that somebody has to work off of that says, okay, it's this wide, they're gonna come in and out this time, all that kind of stuff.
Tonight doesn't guarantee those.
What's
Say
the
that
name
again?
of the company?
I'm sorry, tonight doesn't guarantee
Complete
those.
Excavating Inc.
Complete Excavating.
Go to their website, show some of the projects we're working on.
Would all the equipment be stored to the back of the property?
Yes.
not visible really to.
Yeah, and we actually, there's a fence drawn on there too.
Okay, it's hard to see on.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, but we did have a fence drawn on there between the shop and the office. So the shaded area was ultimately like asphalt millings.
Okay.
And then there would be a fence line between that and was to try to screen that.
Sure.
I mean, in full transparency, my goal is to hopefully build a big enough building that I can keep everything inside, but it's kind of expensive.
It helps me to like visualize or see kind of pictures what it's going to look like. We've talked about some other areas nearby where K32 is turning into a storage lot, basically one after the other, and we didn't want that to be necessarily what our portion of K32 looks like. Can you tell me how this interacts with the K32 overlay plan?
You're referring to the overlay district that was, that does, I guess, in terms of official ordinances, that is no longer a thing. I don't know the better way to say that,
Yeah,
but
they did that with ordinance 963.
yes. So
After, they did have a K32 corridor zoning overlay district. And essentially, as we followed up on this, that existed for some time. However, the 2016 timeframe, maybe someone.
2016, ordinance 963.
So essentially what they did was they passed this ordinance somewhat incorporating those same standards throughout. So if it's C2, C3, doesn't matter. They didn't make these exceptions for the corridor. They actually somewhat aligned the entire city with some of those very same standards. So the overlay district doesn't exist.
How much did we spend on that?
In 2016, I would guess it was not a very expensive project like Mark just outlined. They took the K32 overlay and folded it in. Almost the entirety of the zoning regulations now follow those same standards. I was going through it and it reads, I don't want to say they just highlighted, hit Control C and Control V, but it was pretty close to take the K32 overlay standards and make them citywide. So that's why, that's why the robustness of the development review process is the way that it is. That's where the design review committee came into play. That's where the preliminary and final development plan requirements came into play, all the application requirements. So, officially the K32 overlay is no longer a thing, but in reality, it is now, you can almost think of the whole city as being,
Everything. It's nothing and it's everything.
It was, I think it was restrictive enough and comprehensive enough that that group at the time felt that should be the standard. So,
Is there a possibility to connect this with a specific buyer so it can't be sold off to somebody else to be used for a different purpose?
I don't know if you can tie an ordinance, rezoning ordinance to, if you guys know of any examples of that. I've never seen something like
revert it back to a C2 if he decides to sell it.
Right. Can we revert it to a C2 if he decides to sell it? Because it helps me to know that what his plan is and that we can design it in such a way that you don't see that storage from K32 and it's not certain, other things allowed in C3. My concern is the other things allowed in C3 that might come down the pike if changes his mind or something.
Well, worth noting is that if it was sold to somebody else who did want to put something like that in, they would be required to go through the same, you'd see the development plan in all of its detail. What's the landscaping look like? What are the elevations from the street? What's the stormwater runoff look like? All the same stuff we're talking about with, this isn't just because of this application, this is because it's an application.
So let's use the storage lot for an example, because that's permitted in C3. If the current owner or prospective owner decides to not pursue this deal in a year, sells it to someone else, and that person wants to do a storage lot, just flat out storage lot, is that something we can say no? Or is that something that is permitted under C3, so our hands are tied?
You can't deny their ability to apply for it, but nobody is under any obligations to say yes or no to. You have to meet the standards, and part of those standards are the design review committee's feedback, all of the design criteria, the architectural standards, all of those things apply regardless of who it is. The same reason why, again, the city hall went through the same thing.
So they could say, we don't want to see any bit of storage from K32.
Let's see more landscaping and screening along K32. And if they say no, then it could go through the process and the DRC has recommended this. Planning Commission would say, well, I concur with the DRC. Like, again, it's hard to get into super specific examples, but these are the types of things that could come into play, again, with almost any application.
One of your questions is fairly legal. And if we want to maybe get the answer to that, but I think we're very familiar with these inverse takings. So I think if we said, you build all this and then sell it off as a C3, my intent would be to buy this and use it as it's being used. And then suddenly you said, well, you bought it, now it's not a C3. It doesn't seem to ring as maybe that isn't the way to do business law.
Well, that's a 24-month
Yeah.
exception.
I would presume that if they start building this thing and for some reason they needed 26 months, that they could come and ask for an extension. But if there's nothing happening in 24 months, and this development agreement is approved, this thing goes back to a C3 under this, C2 under the ordinance. That makes sense. Am I correct there?
Correct.
Josh, is that how you're reading it as well? Mr. Gerber approves.
Rezoning use can always implicate takings issues because when you rezone something, that makes the property potentially more valuable for users to do so. There could be almost a speculative aspect to it. I don't think it's necessarily permanent. It just it kind of is one way in the sense that once you open that up for one business, it potentially could be used for any use to a subsequent owner. E3, the 2-year thing I reviewed, it sounds like you guys are more familiar with the actual process that if it's not built out in 24 months, it doesn't work.
Standard procedure, yeah, like I said, almost all the rezonings I've seen in
So
the
I'll
past.
I'll defer to the elect wisdom zoning issues on that, but from taking standpoint, it's not that it's impossible. There are state statutes that govern when more restrictive use rezoning would implicate more than 10 owners. There's a very specific statutory process that doesn't, even if it's under 10 owners, it doesn't necessarily. Anytime you open it up, it's more difficult to get that. I did look at the adult business, not that that's really an issue here. This particular parcel would be next to impossible to put under because it's the church kind of wraps up behind.
There's two actually abutting directly to the east.
So that,
Abutting, yeah.
but that church on the corner kind of goes all the way up, and then are there 2 residences right on 32, or is there a church?
There's a church, if on the image that we're looking at here, along 4th Street, the building on the southeastern corner, and then where it bends to the west. Both of those properties are churches, and everything else that you're looking at north of 32 is residential.
So there's a 500-foot requirement from any church. I think that potentially be defined building which zoning, but then there's also 250-foot requirement from R1, basically lesser included residential or ag property. All of those around the one to the west, residential currently.
Yes, R1. I think the ag starts a little bit farther east. R1 directly to the west, ag R. So where the purple line, the 2 properties that are coming off of College Drive that go back a little ways, and there's a kind of an east-west purple line there. North of there is ag R. That's the Lake of the Forest golf course property. The 2 south of that along K32 are R1. Everything to the northeast is RDS. Everything along 4th Street on the south side is zoned R1, except for those 4 houses that are almost look like they're cut out of the church property. Those are R2. but everything else is R1 or Ag R.
So I would say that which for whole business to try to pursue something like that. I think you really are looking at whether the decision to whether to open this up to more types of construction sites.
Well, there's a number of them.
But basically the storage aspect behind the building. Got C3 across the street.
C1 and C2 on the south side.
Council had to address was, and they were very concerned, so was the community, and Mr. Millat mentioned it as well, the number of trucks that were proposed to come, the vehicles, trucks or whatever, coming in and out of that property. Was in the hundreds, he said, it was pretty big operation. You don't envision that as something. How many, even with multiple trips, how would that be? I have 50 vehicles, what do you have?
I understand you're referencing, and that actually they used to sell material out of there. And that was the reason for that, because actually I hauled material out of there myself for other projects. I'm not going to say that ain't going to happen at first because you have the site development. But once that's done, no, I do not anticipate that kind of truck.
Yeah, the question is centered on the everyday operation of your business.
Everyday operation, I have 3 dump trucks and a low boy. The dump trucks typically leave, they're gone, they come back in the evening. The low boy leaves once a week, maybe twice a week. I mean, granted, hopefully I have growth over the next few years, but currently that's about our rate.
So very low traffic.
Very low
coming
traffic.
out.
Yeah.
Very low.
Which is why I was referencing the MoDOT, and how they compared it to a storage facility. It's pretty low impact on traffic.
But, no, I'm sorry, but there would still be a traffic study need to be.
I would presume that they would direct that. It's in the development.
It's a very clearly delineated item in the development plan. I think it's a preliminary one of, there's 15 or so things. Some of them are just design standards and some of them are if requested by staff or council to provide these things. I would guess this one would get the full suite of everything. But again, if that's something we can compel at that time, like this is a part of the application requirement, and then it gets folded into all the other details that are, I mean, you're probably talking about a stack of papers, more or less about that thick when we get to that point.
We think putting the office building up front, you're gonna have all the screening requirements that the city has in front of that office building, we're referred to around it, and you have a fence behind that. So seeing that yard, the way he's gonna develop it, is screened pretty good, we think.
So you won't be able to see the equipment and the
You see
storage.
The top of the truck or something, because it'd be high enough that you can see it. The way the elevation is now, if they leave most of that, and you don't want to move any more dirt, then you have to make everything drain the way it should, whatever. It should be a pretty good screening space when it's gonna be up front in the office building, and then the fence, and then the building.
There on that item number 7, the second page has your options available.
So vote is recommended, override the recommendation, or return to planning commission, either of those.
Yeah, Marion, if you return to the planning commission, you can state the reasons why.
Sure. I think it, to me, like you mentioned before, the risk is on the purchaser potentially, or the business owner, until we do a zone change, and then really the risk kind of switches to us a little bit as well, and it's a little bit open-ended. I think that we also do want to encourage businesses to come to Edwardsville, and so that's something to consider. My concern is more so of like the open-endedness of C3, and we don't want to turn it into a storage lot along K32. I'd feel more comfortable with a 12 than a 24-month period, because I think that's more likely that we're dealing with the person standing in front of us this evening than somebody else with a different idea down the road.
It seems like if that gave council more comfort, then that would certainly be doable. And then provide at least saw good faith progress. 24 is what I've seen almost everywhere I've worked, but certainly 12 is something.
For something like that, though, would that be approving as recommended, or would that have to go back to, that would be overriding the recommendation, the 2/3 vote to do the 12-month?
What you're doing is, I would believe that you're modifying this the language in the ordinance which says council must go through an ordinance with a 12-month zoning period. So it essentially says the zoning map shall not be amended until final development plan is approved by the city. So that's saying they have 12 months then to have that approved in place.
Can we do that tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the motion, you're making a motion, then you would want to modify that same language to indicate 12 months.
Yeah, and just to clarify that from a procedural perspective, what the planning commission voted to approve was the recommended motion in that report, which had 24 months. So again, that just to clarify,
Yeah.
it is overriding. Their recommendation was approved subject to. So yes, I'm double tapping this.
But I think that the send back is probably not a good option.
Time is it?
Yeah.
Right,
No, it's all.
right. So would it be safe to read the conclusion down there and change that to 12 months?
In the ordinance language, I realize there's a staff report that suggested that the planning commission added these conditions as a part of it, but you're just strengthening those, right? In the sense that you want them more restricted. I think that's okay. Somebody overrides that, layperson. You're adopting an ordinance, council, if you have that policy.
The sentence you read, I believe, yes, you read it with, but just with the note in the motion that this is,
Correct. Over, yes.
and then it requires 2/3.
Everybody okay with that?
Just to clarify, we can come back and ask for more time.
Yeah, I think in all fairness and reasonableness, yes. There's no reason anybody can't come and ask the council for something. But certainly, and then if they've done the due diligence.
And honestly, that'll most certainly happen because things don't move that quickly. I mean, you guys probably know that from your project, so it's hard to get engineers and everybody clicking together. It just don't happen.
You take full approval, but probably definitely get the application, get the first versions in for comment, get it for screening and things like that. Get full board approval, we would kind of really know that, hey, if we come back and show we're making an earnest effort and we're moving things along, we get some sort of extension, like you say.
Honor the request or not. No, the ordinance is pretty, we're talking about, so let's put the commentary in the sense that I think in good faith, we're having this discussion. Things may change, right? You gotta hold that authority. Yeah, please.
Somebody could say so moved.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion from Councilman Shriver, a second from Councilman Everhart. Will the clerk please call roll? For Fire Chief, please call roll.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
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 If I could make a comment, sir, I am absolutely not against your business. I am in favor of 32 Highway being a nice, beautiful road, and it's not being a beautiful road anymore. That's my concerns on this. I am absolutely not against your business. I want you to understand that.
Well, I'll try to make my little spot as beautiful as I can.
Thank you, because it is actually called it's a scenic highway, Caw Valley Scenic Highway, from all the way from Kansas City, Kansas to the T intersection at 24. And it's deteriorating somewhat in this section of it.
Well, your section, sir, is not the worst. I can promise you. Yours is one of the better sections.
Well, thank you. We'd like to keep it that way.
We appreciate that. And we appreciate businesses coming into Edwardsville. We just want to make sure to keep it. It would help to see the designs, some of those things before, and so that makes it a little bit more on edge. But we're excited to work with you and see what you have in mind.
Understood. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, guys. Have a great night.
Appreciate it. Worth the conversation.
Item number 8, consider charter ordinance 2025-03, a charter ordinance exempting the city from the provisions of KSA 12681 and 12682, and establishing substitute provisions relating to street and alley improvement authority and financing.
Mayor, council, thank you. Background of item number 8. This is a part, in the very first part, of potential bond issuance funds for street maintenance. And these were recommended by our team from Tech Rock, Bridget Morris on council, and Emma Kate Dillon. We're both present, and Bridget's going to lead. Is that correct? Excellent. So they'll give you the background as well as why we need to do this, kind of what purpose it serves.
Good evening. I am Bridget Morris from Q-Tech Rock. So the city brought forth its bond financing plan for this coming year, and upon looking at it, we realized that some of the projects were ineligible to bond. According to state law, cities of the second class are unable to bond certain infrastructure improvements, including I think that they're technically side streets and alleys. They're residential areas, essentially. In order to allow the city to finance this street repair, resurfacing, alleys, etc., we need to charter out of this ordinance, or charter out of the state statute, through an ordinance. Because cities of all kinds in the state of Kansas are not treated the same regarding these bonding matters, we can charter out, and that is what is before you this evening. So essentially, by passing this ordinance, the city would be able to, if it so chooses, to finance such improvements with bonding. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Council, that's really the key here, is that we want to leave no street untouched. And under these particular statutory regulations, we're unable to do some of the subdivisions, maybe the side streets and alleys. We do all our major roads, right? That's pretty clear.
Correct.
But this is what we've done before. We've had to charter out libraries, and all, part of that is that they're not consistent amongst cities of any class. Therefore, we have this opportunity as constitutional authority to charter out of this, and that we'll be able to decide to, or that in our first round of funding, that we can choose some of our major arterial routes, connectors, and some of these side streets and subdivisions to do their streets, all as a part of the comprehensive plan. That's what we're trying to do.
Will this also allow us to use it for storm drainage, potentially like in the downtown area, gutters and that sort
I
of?
don't know if I will give to you. We've had any research on that, whether or not if it's street improvement is that may include, if we define it in a project, my common sense would tell me that if we not define it in a project, we could build stormwater facilities as along with the road project, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
so there are certain drainage aspects that are included in the charter ordinance. We technically charter out of everything of those two statutes, but we basically put those things back in. And then the only thing I would add is we this charter authority just makes it more flexible if the city were to choose to follow this.
This would only be regarding streets and not buildings or, correct?
That's all
No
that's covered.
sidewalks.
Just streets.
Streets, the things, the improvements that go along with them,
Yeah,
include the
any
sidewalks
ancillary.
and things that have to happen as well.
Mark, what would be the amount of expenditures that would require it to be an election?
It's not really about the expenditures.
I mean, is that a good question or not?
Well, it's really about the street specifically, right? For the, in the subdivision. For example, if we don't charter out of this, we have Williams Farms, for example. This doesn't apply. We can't use this funding for that particular piece without it being elected. Right?
Correct.
Having an election would cost money, you know, unless, then we have to wait for the next one, right? So there's a delay, and we can just go and get, literally, this kind of just cleans the slate, and then, so you choose, you say, we want to do these 5 things, and it includes some subdivision. We don't have to do any of this other stuff, we just simply charter out, and you decide exactly the budgetary priorities and the street priorities. There's no fallout consequences.
Now, this is upon passage of the ordinance, should the council approve the ordinance. It would be published twice, and then there's a 60-day protest period, and then on the 61st day, it becomes law.
What are we trying to do that would otherwise have to go to the election? Like what street projects are we?
I don't think, if I understand the question, by doing this, we can cover all the streets with the bond financing. We can have bond financing for these other streets, but to spend that money, if I understand correctly, we'd have to go to an election. To simply do Castle Rock, or maybe these, a side street, an alley, for example, just right, if we decide to pay that, this was money, then we couldn't do that without an election.
I guess my only concern is I was very adamantly against chartering out or home ruling out of some statute. It was a state statute that would allow governing body to build municipal buildings without going to vote because of a certain amount, the threshold that it was. And so I'd like to hear more about what are we home ruling out of? What was it there for? And if we don't have a specific project, why we're home ruling out now?
So I didn't get that you were asking for specific projects, but when we did the PACER study, these subdivisions were a part of that maintenance review. So it was a condition, whether it's today or in 5 years, we're going to have to maintain the streets and with lot line. So comprehensively, what we're trying to do is we have a comprehensive plan that says this is your PACER rating, and this should be the progress of those particular things. And oh, by the way, these are the big ones, but there are also small ones that we should consider every year. So comprehensively, what we want to do is package it up. Here's the plan, and here's the money. And it could be from more than one source. We have other maintenance money that we can apply as well, not 100% for this bond measure, right? Since now we did a master plan,
If
right?
if I remember correctly, what you're talking about is when we did the city hall and all of that. We chartered out of a statute that had a master plan requirement, and that was the one that you all as a council decided at that time to keep that election requirement when we chartered out of. If I remember correctly, the main reasoning for that is those types of projects were really big dollar projects. And the big thing with that statute, when you charter out of that, is it is not subject to the city's overall debt limitations. Whereas these, even though we're chartering out of it, these bonds, any bonds issued under this authority, still be limited to the city's overall debt limitation of 30% of the assessed valuation. So you're not taking away that option, whereas that other authority, and that was an authority that we had explored as you could charter out of that and kind of amend that charter ordinance we used to use that authority, but we figured this authority was the more conservative approach because it didn't kind of take that away from the voters, but most cities have chartered out of any type of these really small issue election requirements. So for example, some of these street projects that we are looking at are not that big, only a couple $100,000, and having an election for that is when it's really costly.
I think I'm understanding. So because we've done large street projects that were millions of dollars, and that didn't go
And
to vote.
those are covered. So they're the different authority that those are all covered under, and that's for called Main Traffic Way Authority, and that's where the city has in the past, and you can amend that. You by ordinance say these certain streets are designated as main traffic way or a main traffic way connector.
But
There
this
are
allows
certain
us to use.
requirements to designate them, and some of these streets in that 5-year maintenance plan couldn't have been designated under that.
Yeah, they didn't meet the criteria, so, because they're alleys, they're smaller streets, they're subdivisions and things. So what we're doing is really the same thing we've done under, and what she's referring to originally is our master plan, right? And we tried to look at how that related. So this will still, any bond measure, we need to be careful, we can't just go out there because it's going to be a part of our 30% ceiling, that sort of thing. So this is really about, I think you hit the nail on the head, is that smaller projects we just can't go out and bond in the sense of, because they require this election, but we're treating them, if we do this, we'll treat them as any major street project that's associated with, say, a pull-through arterial street in one of our main streets. It's the same criteria, right?
And this again is just if in the future, because some of those smaller street projects, it might not be a financially good decision to bond those. That's going to be up to the city, up to the financial advisor. This just puts it in place. As we remember, Charter Authority takes that 60 days after the publication. So that would delay any type of bond issuance in the future. If, let's say, this spring you decided we do want to bond certain streets that aren't covered by an authority, you would then have to wait that extra time period. So this just puts it in a place to use that authority, but there's a chance you could never end up using this authority if you decide all the streets that you're going to finance with bonds already go into the main traffic authority.
So this just allows us to fix this neighborhood streets where we already can fix the arterial streets.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So normally one of the things that you can't do when you're chartering out of is charter out of debt limitations, but they need to be 30% for the city. But these individual statutory ones, this is going, if in a couple of years, if in one bond issuance you have a lot of residential streets that all need to be bonded, this will help you to do that all at the same time.
Can you repeat that? Because that part was a little bit more concerning.
So the statute says that the total amount of bonds issued for such a shall not exceed.
How much would that be for Edwardsville? Because that might be fine to leave in, just for some financial,
Well, then you would not be, I mean, it would not, because then you can't issue the bonds for the entirety of the project. I would not recommend that.
Consequence, I would see that's actually very restrictive.
Well, the other thing is that
Correct.
so
For those specific streets. So if you do not pass this, in order to pay for the improvements to these specific residential side streets that are, et cetera, that are not main thoroughfares, you would have to go through an election in order to bond them, if
So
that's how you want to pay for it.
have to home rule out of the debt limit to bond out or to charter out of the election piece. You can't separate those.
You can separate those. It's just to look forward in the future, because amending a charter ordinance is also going to take that same requirement of timeline. It's usually better for a city if they have some flexibility. But as we said, there's going to be actually 2 different times where you would still have to approve how much is actually bonded for any street projects. That would be the actual project authorization resolutions that set forth the projects, the exact descriptions, the locations, and the amounts. So you can always not approve those, and then when we actually go to bond, you would also have to approve those.
I understand that. I just feel like I am fine with time, like when I'm looking down the road in the future of how much debt our city can go in. Sometimes there's statutory limits for a reason, and where we don't necessarily want to go to an election to use financed money to fix up neighborhood roads when we're also throwing out a debt limit, like how much we can go into debt over something. I feel like we should know how much that is.
You would still have the debt limit. It's
The
still,
overall debt limit of the city that the city absolutely cannot ever, yes. And there's a lot of statutes that have these small little ones, but yes, the overall one, you still are going to have to follow that number.
Which is 30%.
I've never seen that happen.
That is illegal.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I've never been asked that question. I've never had a client do that.
So, the concern for we need to spend more money. We don't.
The only thing I might say about a sunset, I understand where Mr. Knight's going with this, but you can't look at this as a 5-year plan. You have to look at it as an infinite plan. I mean, this is just version 1, but in 5 years, we're going to need another 5-year plan for our streets. So limiting ourselves, I mean, street maintenance is just an ongoing thing. We're going to have to continue to do this if we want to keep up.
But it sounds like fire.
Then we'd have to, yeah.
Right. I'd like to know the assessed limit that we're home ruling out of.
The tangible valuation, like 1/3 of 1% of the tangible valuation is that the right?
Yes.
So the sunset consideration would be what happens if you charter out of this, get the exemption, so you don't have to do all this other regulatory stuff, right? And something goes away in 5 years, what happens under those regulations?
Then you have to go back to an election.
We couldn't actually
Oh, the money is
sunset it,
still owed.
because in order to get rid of the charter ordinance, you have to pass another charter ordinance to vote that charter ordinance.
And then now's the provision.
I mean, you can, and if that's what the council would like to do, that is an option. It will be really limited in finance. Oh, yes, absolutely. And the problem is a lot of the times there's, not as much notice from cities, and that's just how it works. So we realize we really need these streets done, and if the cash isn't on hand, then we cannot do anything to help. Because if they are not main trafficways, you cannot bond finance them under any authority without an election. So again, you have to have months and months leading up to an election to pay for that. If that's what the city would like to do, that is an option. There's also benefit districts, but that is going to put all of the cost on citizens. And also there's lots of public hearings and notice and all sorts of other requirements that go into that. And so this was just the cleanest way of giving the city just the option if
So-
you ever want to bond.
But you said we could charter out of the election piece of it, and if we, my question is, if we keep the KSA statute regarding the financial limitation, that would just mean that it would have to go to election if it's over $4 million. Is that correct? So that gives us, that room up to $4 million, and then it would have to go. Just trying to not open floodgates of debt in the future. That's like I'm looking down the road here.
Right,
That's my consideration.
totally understand where you're coming from, your fiscal responsibility. We're sitting here talking too. I mean, I don't know what an underwriter who's looking at a bond transaction would say if the city only has authority to bond this for 5 years. Bond transactions are not 5 years. So if you don't have the authority under this, you have to go back. The city can revoke that. I don't think that would. Again, I mean, we'd have to look at that. That's my point. You know, I think that we're creating more coverage.
And I might suggest that you approach this as, and you mentioned these thresholds, you have these other resolutions, so there are these points in which you have to make decisions, and you just make this part of the financial policy decision that you've got, is that we don't want to exceed this number. So you have this full authority, because that's really what this is. We can go out and fix any roads. We can still do that, right, up to what we have cash on hand, which isn't very much. But we could go and fix these roads. But if we want to do it under this bonding authority, then we need we need to cover the whole town. That's essentially what this will do, okay? But what you could do very easily is decide, this stays in place, but you decide as a policy body, establish a financial policy, written in our financial policy, which says in these bonding measures related to streets, then we won't exceed this number, right? And therefore, that's how you're going to govern yourselves and saying, well, we're controlling this. Because what could happen? We have one bridge that was 10 years ago should have been repaired. Yeah, absolutely. Now, if we don't, and that's in the third part. If you don't have any funding, at some point you may have to address this. This could be that mechanism to do that, right? But wait a minute, we now have these other provisions that may apply to this. We don't have that flexibility. But every time you go to issue bonds, you're paying for it. So there's money involved in the transaction. So if what my vision and what our financial advisors strongly suggest is how to reduce those costs is to package this up. We have temporary funding that we're going to package, and along with the street funding, so it's a little bigger number. But street funding is only a portion of that. But so in the sense that we have to do these things, and I think these will apply. These are not funding for the municipal town centers, so it does go towards our debt ceiling that we already have. So the idea then is we're looking at, I'm throwing out maybe it's 7.7 million that includes these streets and this other temporary financing that we have. So that we don't want to go 5 times. Every time we want to do this subdivision or this alley that we're trying to exempt ourselves from, and have to issue those bonds. And if we don't do some of this stuff, then we got to go to an election at the same time when maybe there is some emergent repairs and maintenance that need to be done. So you're giving yourself full flexibility. Then you can policy that in around the foundation of the law that you install, which is the charter ordinance says that you're not bound by this particular statute.
Didn't we think a charter ordinance that limits the finance as well instead of just a policy? Yeah. Sure. So
mean,
that's more,
sorry, I will say that there's no limits right now, this type of limit in your main traffic way authority. So technically, there's nothing stopping you from doing that with that. So this doesn't open a floodgate in that you're not saying we can issue however much we want for whatever. One, it's only for these very specific things. So it's not even all streets. It has to meet these certain requirements. You as a governing body have to pass a resolution that says these certain conditions are met and therefore this is even eligible under the charter ordinance. So I don't want you to think every other provision that we use as bond authority has limits and we're just not doing it for this. Almost all of the statutory authority that the city would use as a city of the second class, the ones that the city currently uses and chooses to use, do not have any of those per statute limitations.
And so, pass this charter ordinance, this allows us to put all of that money.
No, this is just specifically for those one little street. So there's, like I said, there's a chance you don't even use this. Let's say you only ever bond our huge streets that are already covered by main traffic way authority, and you pay with cash or with other means for these smaller streets that aren't covered. You would not use this. We would use the main traffic way authority because that's the most relevant. That does not have one of these small limitations of saying it has to be this amount only per year for main traffic way. That just doesn't exist in the statutes.
And I think that argument goes towards what I was just saying, you can policy that. Decided, hey, that's a $400,000, we have that in cash. We don't want to put it in our bond or towards our debt ceiling. But without this, you don't have that option. Right? You can't just say yes or no.
It sounds like this charter is not the place to have that confidence without.
I would have loved to see that packaged together. If we're chartering out of a limitation put on any government, really, to have that, the ability to go back and say, okay, but we do want this limitation as well. Does anyone else have questions? I don't want to just monopolize conversation because we can move along.
I am just curious, right now, we don't have limitations?
It's each thing that you bond is under different.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
whenever
So we
hear
don't even have any
streets,
right now.
yes, yeah. So right
That's-
now, with if we weren't doing any small streets, let's say in the spring we were just doing all the big streets, there's only that overall 30% of the assessed
Right,
valuation.
and all this is for is the small streets.
Yes, this is saying if you use, instead of 12,681, we'd be using the charter ordinance as our authority to bond those. So in our bond transcript, that's what would be listed and cited all throughout. That small limitation, if you were to put that back in, it would just say when we use this exact authority, we can only issue this much. But all of the other things, almost everything else in that 5-year maintenance plan was included in the main traffic way.
Right.
So I understand, yes, the wanting to put limits and being careful with that. I'm telling you the practical effects of this, for example, this 5-year thing. We are only doing this for, I don't know, less than $1 million of street projects. This is just if the city doesn't have cash on hand and these projects need to be done, you could use this.
And I'm not as concerned about the 5-year piece of it. I think what you're saying is it's better to charter out of these and then come up with a whole different charter that deals with debt entirely for financial policy.
Probably a
It's not in that. And then just for an example, and I know this is city of the second class, so it's hard to compare. Every single city of the first class that we represent and have as a client has a similar type of statute for public improvements. Not this exact one. Theirs is even easier to charter out of for all sorts of things. None of them keep in that small limitation just because you don't know what's going to come up and what you will need that bond financing for. And like, as we all know, the bond process does take a while anyway. Adding in that extra 61 days plus the 2 publications plus however long to charter out of, that doesn't give you the flexibility as a city if you need to bond finance those projects for some reason in the future.
So that was something totally different. But wait, is that something totally different you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what
Threw me way off the tracks.
Yeah,
I'm like,
no,
wait a
what
minute.
she's saying is we can adopt the as
Right.
they're stated, and it's more, it accomplishes more of what I was talking about if it's a whole different charter that
Okay.
would deal with that.
Gotcha. You could, and Mark said that we could put some language in our financials that if we wanted to,
Yeah, certainly.
if that would make people feel better, right?
They're suggesting some sort of binding, future binding charter. But it's only binding if you don't have the majority, super majority votes to undo it. So in that particular one, staff recommendations regarding how
We don't want to come up with something that we're already over or something like that, but I think that, I don't know if that,
Yeah.
everybody's comfortable, but that helps me, so.
do we need any of their opinion, their advice as to how we should move forward given the discussion? Can you wrap it up, summarize what your legal advice would be related to this?
For this.
I mean, I think it's pass it with the reminder that, again, this isn't for a specific project technically, so it does count for any street and alley in the future, but again, you received that charter ordinance, it's only within those very specific guidelines. And then I would just say it gives you the flexibility in the future if you need to bond finance, but you don't ever have to use it. So if we decide with, the financial advisor's advice that it's not advisable to bond finance these small street projects when we're doing it with this other thing, that's what he's saying about packaging it together. Obviously, you're not going to just do a couple $100,000 and do a whole bond issue of just that. But if we're picking out projects of what needs to be bonded, if they decide, okay, we don't need to use this authority, it may never even be used. It's just putting that in place so that if those street projects are a priority to you as a city council for policy reasons, it's what you're hearing from your constituents. We need streets, we need these streets done, and you don't have the cash on hand. This gives you the opportunity to do it. But again, we will have this, if it's passed and becomes effective, you will still have a resolution, which would be setting out the exact improvements that you would be financing, the exact amounts, the exact location, and then still, once that's done, we'll still have the actual bond resolution of bond. So you still have several safeguards. You're not saying we will issue bonds for streets and alleys for an unlimited amount.
Right.
You cannot do that.
And this came to our attention because the city wanted to bond certain streets. And we said, well, you can do that, but you have to go through an election. So this is a way to allow the city to take care of the projects that it wants to take care of in an efficient and cost-effective manner. So that's our recommendation.
Any questions?
Mark, as an example, that the bridge we're talking about on 98th Street, would we be able to afford that if it collapsed, or would it have to be bonded?
Yeah, I mean,
And this would be,
yeah, so the question is, do we have the cash on hand to fix that? We don't.
yeah, because you guys are going way over my head.
The bridge on 98th Street, I'm pretty sure, for example, main traffic light.
Yes, it is.
Right, that's our
So that's,
charitable.
I'm saying it's very few and far in between projects that this would even apply to. This is just, hey, we have all of these street projects. We already have authority that covers most of them. It's just, if for some reason you all wanted to bond these other ones, we would need authority in place before we could go through with a bond.
And this would give that authority.
Correct.
If we do this the way it's written right here.
Correct.
So if you think of Edwardsville, not to belabor this, where the road was sinking, that's a subdivision road that we could not bond, but there, but had it been worse, it would be very expensive. We don't have the cash to fix that. So that's a perfect example. That got worse, big sinkhole, several $100,000 to fix that. We didn't have this in place. We don't have that flexibility to put it there and say, please, we need $5 million in bonds to fix this whole residential area.
So,
And even if this was in place, you could decide, no, I do not want to bond that much. That's not a good idea for X, Y, Z reasons. You're only putting this in place in case you need to use it.
Makes sense.
So you just need a motion to adopt charter ordinance number 2025-03.
Make a,
Yeah, or just the ordinance. However you
want to say it, Garrett?
What do you do?
I've been sitting right here like this.
Get ready.
I'll take that or two.
Make a motion to adopt charter ordinance number 2025-03, exempting the city from the provisions of KSA 12-681 and 12-682 relating to street and alley improvements and providing substitute and additional provisions on the same subject.
We have a motion from Councilman Shriver, a second from Councilman Mullen. Will the clerk please call roll?
Includes the mayor. Yes.
It's a voting, a vote of the governing body. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Item number 9, consider ordinance 1097, amending appendix A fee schedule of the Edwardsville Code of Ordinances.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Chief Wenham has promised brevity. Okay, whatever we can come with. Essentially, the background is before you. The fire department has done their due diligence in researching and gathering all the information. And essentially, they've come to the conclusion that regionally and nationwide, that sort of thing, our fees were just slightly askew on the lower end. And so he's giving you a comparison as to how those have played out over the research. So we'll talk about that. What he's asking you to do is just amend our fee schedule, which is located in Appendix A in the Code of Ordinances. Chief.
Mayor, Council, thank you. For you tonight, as summarized by the city manager, is for you to consider Ordinance 1097, amending the EMS fee schedule for the Edwardsville Code of Ordinances. A brief summation is we have gone out and done a comparison of national and local charges related to EMS billing of communities of a similar size. Currently, you see our current EMS billing schedule, which has been from our last update of 2023, which at that point in time, we updated our treatment and no transport bill and our specialty care transport fee. Other than that, none of our fees had really changed since 2021. When we looked at our local comparisons and regional like agencies, we compared KCKFD, Sedgwick County, MedAct, and compared based off of a bill of Bonner Springs resident and non-resident and the Edwardsville Fire Department, and the average with those in there come up to the prices that you see there. Bonner Springs was the only other agency in the area that charged a non-resident and resident fee. We had previously started charging resident and non-resident fee for our motor vehicle responses, which you're going to see when we discuss here later on. We have started to implement now with our proposed EMS fees. When we also look at nation-like agencies related to EMS billing, you're going to find out we start to fall in line with our proposed billing. We were starting to fall behind with our national average compared to like-sized communities in Colorado, Texas, North Carolina, Minnesota, and Iowa, based off of our BLS, emergent, non-emergent fees, our ALS level 2, emergent, non-emergent fees, treatment, non-transport, specialized specialty care transport, and mileage rates. One of the biggest changes that's occurring in 2025 with the passage of the federal government bill was the Medicaid Medicare rate was allowed to go up to $20 per loaded mile, to where our current rate was changed off of 2023 to $13 per loaded mile for the transport rate. So it's going to allow us to bill our customized billing needs based on our residency. A resident is classified as anyone who lives in Wyandotte County, particularly Edwardsville. the actual city limits of Edwardsville. All right. And the big thing is they start paying part of the taxes. So they're already fundamentally paying part of the EMS fees that we establish. All right. It also still provides us the means that we can sit there and pay for hardship fees, evaluate write-offs, and we sit there and dictate how we rate with our billing companies. Now, the proposal that's in front of you tonight is the change for the rates coming into effect. Our BOS non-emergency rates and emergency rates are going to go to, for a resident, are going to go from $607 to line up to about $900 for a resident. For a non-resident, it's going to go to $1,000. Our ALS level 1 non-emergency and emergency rates are going to go from $850 to $1,000 for a resident and to a $1,250 for a resident for an emergency. ALS level 1 non-emergency non-resident of $1,250 and an ALS level 1 emergency rate for a non-resident for $1,500. ALS level 1. Okay.
So for those who are not BLS is basic life support. So the most basic that can apply. You've got ALS. This is where our paramedics come into play.
I'm getting ready to explain level 1 and level 2. Okay. So a level 1 ALS rate usually starts with the incorporation of a cardiac monitor and an administration of one IV and one sort of drug with it. All right. So we start with our cardiac monitoring. The triggers are ALS level 1. Emergency and non-emergency depends upon whether we turn on lights and sirens after we leave the house. ALS level 2, irregardless of level all, resident and non-resident is the differentiation. We go from $1,235 to $1,500 or $1,750. Level 2 is the initiation of a cardiac monitor and at least an IV, some sort of drug administration, and goes into an intubation of their airway. So we've gone into 3 critical levels of skill care that triggers the ALS level 2. These are the sickest of the sickest patients. All right. A specialty care transport is set at $1,235. We're going to increase that to $1,500 for a resident. That is going to trigger to $2,000 for a non-resident. Specialty care transports for our identification now for our ALS provided service means that we are putting them on a ventilator, or we're using an ultrasound in transport, or we're using a cyanosis retrieval kit or reversal kit. We are the only provider in Wyandotte County that provides that level of service out of the 3 services. Treatment no transport per incident is going to go from $200 to $250. Please do not think that a treatment no transport is we have gone because you have fallen down and we've put you back in your chair. Treatment no transport because you fell down, we will show up, we will pick you back up, we will run your vitals, and if you're okay, you do not get billed for it. A treatment no transport, if we show up and you had an issue with your diabetes, we started an IV and gave you glucagon or D50, and then you signed off on any treatment transport decision from there because we administered a drug, that is what triggers a cost. If you had a breathing issue and we had to give you a respiratory treatment care, albuterol Atrovent treatment, and you signed off any further medical treatment from there, that triggers a cost. So just because you had a fall does not trigger a $250 bill. So we do quite a bit of falls, and we do not bill our residents for a fall. Please do not think that we're billing every resident that falls all of a sudden because we run a set of vital signs that we are billing them. And then the loaded mile rate is going from $13 to $20 a mile, loaded mile. So in short, the changes are due because of the increased costs to provide ambulance care, the increased costs of purchasing ambulances, and the increased costs of drugs. Some of our drugs are now getting to be $500 a dose to $1,000 a dose. We are responsible to buy those drugs, and they may have a shelf life of 6 months. Some have a shelf life of 30 days, whether we use them or not. So in closing, staff recommends the City Council to adopt Ordinance 1097, amending Section A of 5.001 of the Emergency Medical Service Fee Schedule of the Edwardsville Code of Ordinances. And if you guys have any questions at this time, I stand to answer them.
Are we all, Medicare pays for a lot of this and then private insurance? Are we pretty well caught up, or are we people in debt? I'm trying to say,
So, yes,
they
sir.
owe us.
We bill their insurance. All right. So for a resident in Edwardsville who has Medicare, we get about $400 for that run. All we bill is their Medicare. If that is all the insurance they have, we do not pursue charges beyond that, regardless of what the remaining balance is. If that said patient only had Medicare and is deceased, we do not bill the remaining family for the balance of the insurance. If that patient has private insurance and they have a $250 ambulance copay, we bill Blue Cross or Aetna, and then we bill for the ambulance copay. If that patient has a hardship and they cannot pay that remaining balance, all they have to do is provide hardship to myself or DC Mellon, and then we write off that remaining balance, or we work with them to create a payment plan for the remaining $250 write-off. That is only for our residents of Edwardsville we provide that to. If it is a non-resident, they have 60 days to pay their ambulance bill, or we send them to collections. And after a period of time, if they go to collections, then we send them to tax write-off. So we only bill the insurance for residents of Edwardsville. What we get from that insurance, regardless of or minus any copay, is what we bill residents of Edwardsville, because they are funding some of that ambulance service with their taxes. And hence why we've also gone to a resident, non-resident pay scale.
You bill all insurance that exists.
Yes.
Everybody we run, what he's saying is we offset slightly whatever Medicaid is paying, whatever their insurance is paying, that's what we're
That's we bill their insurance. If they don't have insurance, unfortunately, they're getting the bill. But 68% of our residents that we have transported are covered by Medicaid or Medicare, just due to the location of where we're making the majority of our runs from, of our residents. So what we bill from their insurance is what we get recovered back by.
I was just wondering how much delinquency we have right now. I'm just curious if that was something.
So far this year, we've wrote off about $97,000 from what the difference is between what Medicare bills out to what we have just experienced in losses. Now, that's not including that every insurance has got a contracted rate, because ambulance services are a loss. They are just a standard up loss, because we're going to spend $2,400 on a cardiac arrest call, and we're going to recover about $800 to $1,200 on it. That's just the nature of doing business.
We're providing a heck of a good service.
There's no money to be made, but we try to recover costs to buy the equipment and pay for the ambulances, put the service out there.
Pretty good service.
Yes, sir. We recover about 74% of our billing company, and we're getting, like I said, about 74% of it back right now. And it's about a 63% of our full out bill out rate, which is
that's probably
about the average.
I was going to say that's probably just about the average.
Yep.
Everywhere.
And we only deal with about 6 hardship cases a year that we write off any type of billing loss to it.
And you just said that you had a service in Edwardsville that none of the other ambulances had, like on
the ventilator, the ultrasound, the IV pump. Right now, we're the only service in Wyandotte County providing those, and the cyanide reversal kits.
All right, thank you for bringing that. That's just my curiosity more than anything.
Uh, 20% supply costs, just in EMS supplies, and the majority of that is the ALS drugs.
just simply offsetting revenue. It's kind of like city on transportation services. Charge a fee, but you never get percent.
If you go to the hospital nowadays, the costs are up for a hospital visit.
Yeah, no, I think that our community needs to be very proud of considering what we had in the past.
Right. Yep, can you?
No, nowhere close.
Through taxation.
Tim, can you, the slide you're on right now, it's just a question, maybe I'm being tit for tat, but the mileage down at the bottom line, proposed changes, resident, non-resident, that stays the same. Can I ask?
Because that's the max that we can bill by Medicare, Medicaid, and that's the max that most private insurances will pay. And it's just easier to have one set mileage rate, irregardless across the board, just for billing purposes with the billing company.
Even if you got to drive clear out to Bonner or something.
Because we can't bill going out. It's just the loaded mileage rate from the patient's home residence to the hospital is the loaded mileage rate. So if we went from, let's say, all the way at the Wyandotte County, Leavenworth County line at the farthest end of Bonner to downtown KCK at KU Hospital, that's going to be 31 miles, which is a difference in the 17 miles from here. It's giving us that extra 13 loaded miles. That's the difference in that $7 per mile loaded rate. But it just comes down to a simple economic figure of we have the same base mileage rate. It's the same flat Medicare, Medicaid approved rate that is going to be what even the private insurance rates are just going to sit there and say, okay, it's approved. This is what the federal government rate's going to pay. It just is a non-negotiable. They don't fight with it and just say, okay, we're going to pay it.
Right.
Yes.
You get paid.
Well, and here's a question. I know you said you go to Edwardsville resident and you help them when they fell down and you don't charge. What about you go out to Bonner and do that?
They're getting a bill.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to consider ordinance number 1097, amending emergency medical service fee schedule of the Edwardsville ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilman Malat, a second from Councilman Mullen. Will the clerk please call roll?
Owen,
Yes.
Everhart,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Vote passes 4-0.
Chief, thank you for the answers to the question.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Maybe soon we can start a loaded mileage rate for our PD.
I think I have, Rack.
All right, moving on. Our city clerk is ready for us. Item 10, consider a contract award for project EDV 2024-05, which is 104th Street Sidewalk Extension Phase 2 to Inco Inc. in the amount of $416,871.66 for the construction of a sidewalk from Metropolitan to Edge Hill Road.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Council, you have the item number 10 background before you. Spells out all the bidders and who we're recommending the award to. It also indicates after on construction or within the construction period, we have a reimbursement from our cost share award that the governor came down and announced for us. And they've agreed to reimburse us for construction specifically at $125,000. So in order to get that, we have to construct this. Not necessarily bound to that whole thing. If you choose not to move forward, that's fine. We have a good bid turnout. I will point out that Cost Construction, we did the first phase, we did an excellent job. A little high, we just couldn't make it. So we're pretty firm on that, so we couldn't get them to return. But we do have a recommendation that we accept the bid by Inco USA LLC in the amounts stated previously, 416,371.66, which I'll point out is about 2.58% above the engineering estimate, which is pretty darn good. That's really good because they estimated that some months ago. And we've been working to this point. You have all the design documents in their specific bid, as well as how they're going to build this out. Now, one of the cost drivers here is if you've been up and down the road there, there's a pretty good ditch. There's some drainage, that sort of thing. But we're keeping it on that west side. Yes, on the west side, so non-cemetery side. And the reason we looked at that is because it impacts the other properties much less. In fact, we will, if I understand how they're going to grade, this will fix some of their grading problems. They'll be able to mow better and that sort of thing as we kind of work our way up to the building. So I'll stand for questions if you have.
It's like a $200,000 swing. What was the difference here, the lowest and highest?
Oh yeah, that does happen, and you notice.
I know.
It's just,
Nothing outstanding, or?
No, there's no red flags here in the sense that we've opened enough bids over. What happens is what they may interpret the conditions of the bid slightly different than anybody else, or they tend to have maybe higher labor costs, or they believe their supply costs are going to be more than the others, and maybe where they have to bring the supplies from. So there's a number of variables, and some are more expensive than others, quite frankly. And so what we do is we verify that they can honor this, quite frankly. And we've done that. We say, hey, we bid. Are you leaving any money on the table? What are you doing here? They affirm they have the capacity to do it. They do work all over. They build sidewalks and things like that as well. So
have we used them?
No, not this company. It's the first time I've even heard of it.
Where are they?
They have an address. You want me to look that up here?
Yeah. Yeah, it's only 8 o'clock.
Was it Belton or East Summit? Sorry, folks, I got this way through this.
It looks like they're
How about I
in
do this? I'm sorry.
Google says Olathe.
Olathe, okay. Oh, yeah, there was one, the second bidder was from the service. Yeah, Olathe, I'll trust that report there. But overall, they're not leaving any money on the table according to them. They bid as it was proposed. If you want to complete the project, I would recommend that you accept Inco USA LLC already incorporated.
When will
It's
they
either
do it?
one or the other.
When will they do it?
Their plan is now we're going into winter months, but technically we have a time frame of the end of winter. And the reason that is it corresponds to our CARES Act reimbursement, cost share reimbursement, which is with the state.
Winter of 26?
Yeah, coming up. They should be able to start. I don't know how much winter break they have, but there's things they can do during the cold months and even put in some concrete. It just depends on how fixed it is. They can blanket it. There's a number of things they can do.
Did you say the governor presented more funds from the state? Or?
Not more. It was originally, if you recall, when we went up and she gave the announcements, that was for the first phase 1. But if you look around when we were standing there, we had built quite a bit of it before we had, actually what had happened is the terms weren't publicly available. So then we received the terms and then we're talking to them and they're like, well, let's just reapply in a sense, request for reconsideration, which we did for the second phase. So we had built too much of the construction of the first phase to get that as a part of the construction cost. And so they were agreeable that when we're ready to start this phase 2, that they would, on construction, reimburse that. It's either LLC or incorporated. Incorporated, INC. Okay, sorry.
So if there are no other questions, we'll just hear a motion to approve the contract award for project EDV 2024-05 to Inco Incorporated in the amount of $416,871.66.
I will make that as a motion.
Second.
The motion from Councilman Mawat, a second from Councilman Shriver. Will the clerk please call roll?
Yes.
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 Very good. City manager report.
The only thing I have is I corresponded with you about, just so that I'm clear on my authority, and that's for COLA application and hearing resistance. That is usually historically applied the first day of the year that we're back to work. And I think that our employees are moving forward.
Very good.
Good.
Councilman Mullen?
Merry Christmas, by the way.
Yes.
Happy holidays.
Happy holiday.
Oh, that's Councilman Everhart.
Merry Christmas.
Councilman Mullen?
6 pages. No. You get busy when you get a little older. It's 8 o'clock. Lights at the pickleball courts, are they on yet?
They are on. There's going to be a little bit of adjustment because they're shiny in one place and darker in the other, so that's part of it.
That's awesome.
They're going out there at night too.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think Public Works does a fantastic job down there. There's a lot of positive comments about the park and Chief Whittem, you just explain things so well and you handle things so well. Don't let that pen run out of ink while you're writing all that down. But you guys all do such a good job, all the staff. To have all of you, if you still got ink, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
I'll be quick, although I don't, sit for all night, but I'd like to second what Councilmember Malat said about all our department heads, everybody up here in City Hall. I think that, recap real quickly, the Mayor's Christmas tree lighting was a fun event. Boy, that one of the bigger events, Christmas tree lighting. Lots of good feedback on that. Everything was wonderful. And I'd like to thank all the good conversation up here tonight regarding a possible business coming into Edwardsville. It's ironic, Councilmember Malat, not expressing your concern how we don't have businesses coming here. We've got a business wanting to come here, but I'm proud to be pretty picky about what it is and where it's going to go because it matters. And so I think the conversation was really good tonight about that. So wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Yes.
Okay, let's wrap this up. I also have heard wonderful things about our parks, and I know our fire department and public works have been working on this diligently. I sent an email a while ago. I know Councilman Adcox shared the concern, and hopefully we'll get some updated signage on the pickleball to better. No, well, it's neat. It has rules that don't really line up with pickleball. So just updated signage would be ideal. I sent an email probably a month ago about it, but
you did, and I think
The only thing I would say is Mrs. Adcox asked about approval of the sign through the CPS board, and Mr. Schreiber took that to the board, and they approved the sign as is.
so the question about it, in case it wasn't communicated quite well, is for people who actually play pickleball, who go regularly to parks where people are playing pickleball, never do you go and wait and sit for an hour. There's a rotation that if there's a people playing, then they play one round, which is about 10 to 15 minutes, then they're off. And you pick
Right.
your paddles in order.
Right.
Right now we have an hour wait, which will kind of be a detriment to play.
And we
And
can,
so that
we
was
can talk. We can talk about it
Yeah.
because we had a lot of discussion at the meeting, so we can
And I
take that
think
away. Yes.
Councilman Adcox even had other concerns or questions, I think, for CPS to bring to their attention since that was a requirement, and then they canceled the meeting. And so I think that's a concern too, is if we have these things that must be vetted through the CPPS board, then we probably need to have their meetings. So those things can go through there as well. And so otherwise, I assume we'd have the authority to move things along, should we need to do that, hopefully. Mayor's Christmas tree lighting, great success. We were a little concerned with the weather, given the day before. It turned out great, wonderful turnout. Hopefully we'll be able to meet pretty soon for the planning group of that, to just kind of go over, hey, what do we want to continue for next year? What do we want to tweak? That sort of thing. Councilman Malat and Councilman Shriver were both honored very recently for over 10 years of service to local government and specifically to the city of Edwardsville. So I wanted to make sure to share that with the public because that is quite the commitment, and so we certainly appreciate that. Hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, and we will see you next year.